3 months ago, I was living in a $4.2 million house in California with my husband and kids. Today, I'm holding a letter that tells me my entire life has been a lie, and the man who destroyed me might have unknowingly saved my life. My name is Marissa Hale, and I'm 46 years old. Until recently, I was a senior property claims adjuster in Santa Monica, the kind of woman who spent her days helping people recover from disasters, never realizing one was waiting for her. I had what most would call the American dream: a charming husband named Julian, my partner of 19 years. 2 children, Rowan, 16, and Ela, 14. Bright, beautiful, the center of my world. We lived in a stunning house perched on a hillside, with glass walls overlooking the Pacific. Sunlight pouring in every morning like a blessing. I thought I knew who I was. Marissa Hale, daughter of Margot Hale, the school librarian who raised me alone after my father supposedly died in a boating accident when I was 11. Mom and I had lived quietly in Michigan, just the two of us. She was the kind of woman who remembered every detail: birthdays, recipes, overdue library books, and made life feel orderly and safe. Julian was my high school sweetheart. We met at 17, married in our 20s, built everything together: career, home, family. He became a financial consultant, charming and articulate, the sort of man everyone trusted. Together, we built a life so comfortable it felt invincible. Then, cracks began to show. About 18 months ago, Julian started taking phone calls in private, closing the office door more often, working late. He said it was new clients, big opportunities. But something in his eyes had shifted, something cold, assessing. The warmth that had once lit up our marriage slowly dimmed until all that was left was the ghost of affection. The kids noticed. Rowan, my athlete, started asking if Dad was mad at me. Isla, my dreamer, stopped sketching sunny beaches and began drawing storms and broken faces. I kept telling myself it was stress, maybe midlife distance. I planned weekends away, romantic dinners, anything to bring us back. But the harder I tried, the further he drifted. Then came the papers. Divorce. But not just that. A demolition of my life in legal language. According to Julian's lawyer, I was an alcoholic who had stolen from clients, falsified reports, and endangered our children. They presented forged receipts, fake expense statements, even testimony claiming I'd covered up insurance fraud. None of it was true. The court hearings were brutal. My professional reputation gone overnight. Julian sat beside his attorney, looking calm, confident, as my world crumbled. When the judge granted him primary custody, the house, and most assets, I felt something inside me die. But what gutted me most was what he whispered as we left the courtroom. "You'll never see Rowan and Isla again. I'm moving them to Seattle next month, and you don't have the money to stop me." 6 weeks later, I had nothing left. My license suspended, my accounts drained, my name stained. The only place I could go was my late mother's house in Brookfield, Ohio, empty since her passing 2 years earlier. I packed what was left of my life into a beat-up Subaru and drove 300 miles east, each mile peeling away another layer of the woman I thought I was. The small white ranch house looked unchanged: black shutters, porch swing, hydrangeas long dead in their pots. I sat in the car for nearly an hour before stepping inside. The air smelled of dust and lavender soap, my mother's quiet signature. Her reading glasses still rested beside her chair, her last mystery novel, open mid-chapter, as if she'd only stepped away for tea. I told myself it was temporary, just a stop to breathe before figuring out how to fight back. But as I stood in that silent living room, surrounded by the remnants of her careful life, I realized how far I had fallen. 3 months ago, I could see the ocean from my bedroom window. Now, I was staring at Mrs. Brodie's rusting wind chimes across the street. My mother, Margot Hale, had lived in this house for over 30 years. She'd bought it after my father's supposed death, determined to give me a home that felt safe. She never remarried, never dated, never even spoke much about the past. She devoted herself to raising me and her work at the public library, steady and unshakable. We never had much, but we always had enough. Somehow, even on a librarian's salary, she managed to pay bills, fix the car, and send me to college. I used to ask how she did it. She'd just smile and say, "You find a way when someone you love depends on you." Now, standing in that same living room, everything she'd built whispered of strength and secrets. My children were gone. My husband had turned into a stranger, and my future had vanished. But at that moment, I made a silent promise. I would rebuild. This house was all I had left, and I would use it to fight for my children. If this story already feels like it's pulling you under, don't go anywhere. Part 2 will show how loss can uncover the truth buried for decades. Hit subscribe, stay with me, and watch how one woman turns her ruin into reckoning. I threw myself into the work because movement felt like oxygen. The kitchen needed new cabinet faces, the bathroom begged for tile that didn't remember the 80s, and the walls wanted fresh paint to scrub time off the rooms. I sanded floors until my palms blistered and painted ceilings while memories rained down in dust. Every stroke was a refusal to disappear. The basement came last. It was a low-ceilinged maze of boxes, holiday decor, photo albums, the careful archive of a woman who knew how to pack a life into tidy containers. I sorted, I labeled, I let certain things break and left others perfectly intact. That's when I noticed the floor around the old furnace, tiny scratches in the concrete, a halo of disturbed dust. The metal casing had fresh scuffs too, as if it had been inched aside by hands stronger than my mother's had been at the end. It made no sense. Margot wasn't moving appliances in her 70s, but the patterns were there. Something had shifted, recently enough that the dust still betrayed it. I turned off the gas, prayed I was doing it right, and braced a dolly under the unit. Inch by inch, I levered it 3 feet from the wall, my back screaming protest. Behind it, painted the same color as the cinder block, was a squat, old-fashioned safe. No brand, no label, just a dial and a handle, smoothed by use. My hands shook as I turned the dial, trying not to think about the 10,000 combinations I didn't have time to guess. Then another memory rose up, the way my mother called me every year on my birthday at 7:11 a.m. Exactly, the minute she said I arrived. July 11th, 1979, 071179, right to 07, left to 11, right to 79. A soft click, the door side open. Inside were stacks of $100 bills, old rubber bands melted into the edges of some, others crisp and blue-ribboned. I counted with the mechanical focus of someone keeping panic at bay, $829,000. Beneath the cash, there were documents, driver's licenses with my mother's face across different decades, each bearing a different name: Diana Calder, Maria Villanueva, Catherine Dorsey, Social Security cards, birth certificates, a burgundy passport stamped in 1991 under the name Diana Calder. Every piece official, not a cheap forgery. My mother, gentle librarian of Brookfield, had lived many lives before Margot Hale. At the bottom sat a sealed envelope addressed in her careful hand. For Marissa. I sat on the cold floor, legs numb, heart a drum. I broke the seal. My dearest Marissa, if you are reading this, then the past has finally caught up, and I am not there to stand between it and you. Your name is Marissa, but your blood says another. Your father's name was Lucas Vieri. He did not drown in a lake. He was murdered by the Ravello crime family in Chicago on October 1990. I was meant to die with him. I ran. I took you and ran. 3 months later, I testified before a federal grand jury. The U.S. Marshals put us in witness protection in January 1991. That is how we became Margot and Marissa Hale in Ohio. They gave us new identities and enough money to start over. Everything I taught you, how to notice exits, how to keep your voice steady, how to never overshare with strangers, was not paranoia. It was survival. I stopped reading, the words splitting open the ground beneath my feet. The money, the caution, the way she tracked every detail. She hadn't been tidy. She'd been vigilant. I read on. The money in this safe is what remains of the settlement, and what I saved by living small. But there is more you must know. 3 years ago, I heard rumors, quiet but insistent, that old names were being whispered again. I hired private investigators to watch your life from a distance in California. Not because I doubted you, but because I feared the Ravellos never stop. What they found broke my heart. Marissa, Julian did not start this. He was approached. They sold him a story about you, addiction, infidelity, financial crimes, complete with false records. They trapped him with promises and fear until he became a tool. The forged statements, the fraudulent testimony, they funneled it through him. The goal was to take everything, isolate you, and drive you back to this house. They believe I left things that could expose the rest of the witnesses. They are right, but not the way they think. There is a name and number below. Deputy U.S. Marshal Avery Stone. He has been waiting since the day I died. Tell him you are Lucas Vieri's daughter, and you are ready to finish what I started. I wish I could have told you the truth while I was alive. I wanted you to know ordinary safety once in your life. But if you are here, it means the worst has already happened. You are stronger than you know. Use this money wisely. Get your children back. And remember, sometimes the blow that breaks your life is the hand that points you toward the door you were meant to walk through. Beneath the signature was a number in red ink, underlined 3 times. I dialed with fingers that didn't feel like mine. He answered on the second ring. Stone, this is Marissa Hale, I said, then swallowed. My mother was Margot Hale, but I think my father was Lucas Vieri. A beat of silence, a breath. Where are you? In my mother's house in Brookfield, in front of a safe. Don't touch anything else. Don't call anyone. Stay put. I'll be there in 4 hours. 4 hours later, Avery Stone stood in my kitchen, tall and rangy, hair gone silver at the temples, eyes like he'd memorized 1,000 rooms and counted the exits automatically. He came with 2 agents who photographed the contents of the safe, cataloged documents, and asked questions that braided the past and present into a noose around the Ravellos' necks. Your mother was brave, Stone said softly after midnight. both of us with coffee cooling between our hands. She knew eventually they would try to find you through him. They prefer ruin over bullets now. Fewer headlines. Same control. He laid out the pattern. Witnesses from the Vieri case. Pressured, discredited, destroyed. The Ravellos learned that if you broke a person's reputation and family first, they walked themselves to the place you wanted them. Back to the beginning, back to old addresses, back to the last anchor. Then you took what remained. Julian? I asked, voice thin. They used him, Stone said. Fear is a leash, but a leash is still a choice. By dawn, the plan formed. Flip the board. Use what my mother left, the paper, the money trail, the investigator logs, and bait the trap already around me. Stone's team had been passive for 2 years, watching the house. Now they would turn it active. At 6:15 a.m., they picked up Julian in Seattle, along with 3 men who had been shadowing my children. In an interview room, Julian finally saw the full constellation of lies he'd been fed. My drinking, the fake transfers, the doctored reports, stamped with my old firm's letterhead. He didn't stop shaking for an hour. Then he started talking. I made the hardest calls of my life to Rowan and Isla, who were staying with Julian's sister. Their voices sounded younger than their years. I promised the only true thing I had left. I would make this right. Not with rage, with truth. The next days were a blur of sworn statements, chain of custody logs, and names whispered into recorders. We pulled on threads my mother had left, knotted and found the fabric still willing to tear. I slept on the couch, the safe open like a wound, and dreamed of my mother's steady hands closing it for me, saying, "Keep going." The federal indictments came in waves. First, the men who'd handled the forgeries and paid witnesses to lie. Then, the mid-level operators who laundered money through shell real estate deals that had brushed Julian's world until they stuck. Finally, the Ravello lieutenants who orchestrated the long ruin of anyone tied to Lucas Vieri's name. Julian accepted a cooperation agreement. He would testify to everything he'd seen and done, every meeting, every call. He would admit how he let fear and envy curdle into complicity. He would apologize to his children with his actions, not his words. That was the only currency left that mattered. It took 6 months to unwind the legal snare around my name. Stone's team matched my mother's investigator logs to bank trails and burner phones. The forged audits collapsed under scrutiny. Witnesses recanted under oath once they realized the quiet men in the corner of their depositions were not private security, but federal agents. The state licensing board reinstated me with a formal apology that did not restore the time stolen, but acknowledged it had been taken. The custody order was reversed. The judge looked older than when she'd first seen me. "Ms. Hale," she said, "the court failed you." I nodded, out of respect, not forgiveness. Rowan asked if he could move back first. Isla followed a week later with a sketchbook full of storm clouds on one side and small boats on the other. I hung a bell by the back door and told them to ring it whenever they came home. A sound so ordinary it felt like miracle. Julian and I will never be what we were. I don't want what we were. But we sit together with our children and explain how truth can be weaponized and how you draw boundaries that don't bend even when someone is pushing. He is in therapy, learning how to live with the shape of what he did. I'm in therapy, learning how to trust the ground again. We sold the Ohio house for enough to buy a smaller place in Ventura, closer to the ocean, but not so close it pretends life is only view and light. Rowan made varsity again. His coach says a handful of programs are still calling despite the lost season. Isla's drawings carry more sky. She still sketches storms, but now there are windows with lamps burning inside. Deputy Marshal Stone calls every few weeks with updates I write down in a notebook my mother would have approved of. Neat, dated, underlined. The Ravello case is set for trial next spring. I will testify. I will say my father's name in a court that can hold it. I will say my mother's name with the gratitude of a daughter who finally understands the architecture of her love. On the morning I receive the official notice to appear, I drive to the lake alone. Not the Pacific, not the place where illusions shimmer, but a quiet inland water my mother once took me to after a bad day in middle school. I stand at the shore and read her letter again, the creases softer now from so many unfoldings. Sometimes the blow that breaks your life is the hand that points you toward the door you were meant to walk through. Justice isn't loud. It's a key turning in a lock you thought was rusted shut. It's your children sleeping in their rooms without the hum of dread in your bones. It's coffee at the kitchen table you bought with money no one can take. It's calling a marshal who answers because he promised a woman years ago that he would. I don't know if forgiveness is a place I'll ever live, but I know what closure feels like. The house quiet at night, a stack of honest paperwork, my name restored, my children's laughter threading down the hall. I know what love feels like when it is brave enough to leave instructions for the day it can't be there. If this finds you where your life has cracked, hear me. Ruin is not the end. Sometimes it is the hinge. I think about Margot every day. How she saved me twice. Once by running, once by leaving a map. Next year, when I take the stand and speak the truth, she risked everything to protect. I won't be running afterward. I will walk out of that courtroom and ring the bell by my back door and listen for the echo of home. And when my children ask what justice looks like, I will point to the ordinary, the repaired hinge, the steady paycheck, the way the wind moves through our small yard without carrying fear. Thank you, Mom. I'm home. If this journey moved you, share it with someone who needs to hear that even from ashes, there's a way home. Leave a comment, subscribe, and stay tuned, because more real stories of resilience and justice are coming soon.